From the Digital Media Center, on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate-level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Program of the Year and the Best Education Show for 2017. I'm producer and host John Letts. Ramping Up Your English is an instructional support program for intermediate level English learners. And if you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and you want to reach higher levels of proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs and get you closer to your goal. Ramping Up Your English is for English learners from all language backgrounds and for people of all ages. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency.
Our current thematic unit is Native Americans. This is segment 1 of episode 96. In previous episodes, we learned how Native Americans lived prior to the arrival of Europeans. Let's use some of those facts to review the simple past tense of English verbs. The rules for forming the past tense are simple. Add an ed to the end of the present tense verb. Now, if that verb ends in e, simply add a d. Now, the rules don't apply to all verbs. Some are irregular. Here are some sample sentences. Now, I've highlighted to show the past tense verb in each sentence. Some Native Americans belonged to clans. Native Americans lived in all parts of North and South America. Native Americans used some areas for hunting and gathering. Some Americans built great cities. Some Native Americans still lived in some of those cities. America had builders, farmers, hunters, tool makers, traders, warriors, storytellers, and other workers. Some Native Americans attacked their neighbors. Farmers stored their crops for winter, and hunters thanked the animals they killed for giving them food. Leaders often met with other leaders in council. People spoke different languages. People married into tribes, other tribes or bands. Some Native Americans moved to other areas to avoid conflict. The Cherokee spoke an Iroquoian language. Hunters sometimes became farmers. You may have noticed that not all these verbs form the past tense in the regular way. We used some irregular verbs in some of the sample sentences. The past tense verbs built, had, met, spoke, and became are all irregular. They don't form the past tense by adding d or ed to the present tense verb. We're still studying the past, the history of Native Americans. Many things that occurred in the past are still having effects today. And one social studies theme is that of multiple effects, as well as multiple causes. Hence, using the past tense of verbs is an important skill in communicating past actions, events, and situations. In our previous episodes, we learned how Native Americans got along within their groups and with neighboring groups, using the skills of negotiation and the council to deal with conflicts. We also learned that these measures didn't always work. Sometimes conflicts escalated into violence and war. Nonetheless, a measure of balance prevailed, built into the systems that were developed by these same Native Americans. This balance was shattered beginning in 1492 when Christopher Columbus reached the West Indies. As we'll see in the following video, these changes came at a dizzying pace for those who met these Spanish explorers. Let's watch and learn from the 8th installment on Native Americans produced for Ramping Up Your English. Here's the video entitled The Storm.
The storms that ravaged Caribbean islands were well known to the people there. They often came from the east, across the endless waters. This time, the killing wind and storm surge were of a different kind and from a different place. Island people knew nothing about the birth of hurricanes, forming off the African coast and churning across the Atlantic Ocean. A new kind of storm would rise from the Iberian Peninsula in Europe and would devastate Native Americans over centuries of time. Chief Seattle said it best, "The red man's night is long and dark." America was home to hundreds of tribes, nations, bands, and villages. Many were characterized by curiosity around all things different, and by an ethic of hospitality. These traits would ill prepare them for events to break into their world, events that had their birth in Europe. On the Iberian Peninsula, west-facing Portugal had expelled the Muslim royal families that had held power for centuries. They were called the Moors, and their capitulation freed Portugal's energy and resources to use the instruments that the Moors left behind, to use those to explore the world by going to sea. This freedom of movement had them follow the Moors to Africa, where Portugal escalated the trade of slaves. Prince Henry the Navigator invested heavily in the science and math of navigation and the engineering of building seagoing vessels. African adventurism gave way to a new goal, controlling the spice trade from India. The idea was to round the Horn of Africa and sail east to India. This goal seemed achievable because knowledgeable people knew the world was round. It was also known that transporting spices by sea would be greatly more profitable than the current practice of transporting by land. Genoan navigator Christopher Columbus had a different plan. Why sail around Africa when sailing west would bring him straight to the Orient and to India? The learned men of Portugal considered his plan unrealistic, saying he grossly underestimated the distance. Meanwhile, Portugal continued its explorations. In Spain, Christian armies surrounded Granada. The Moorish ruling family in the hilltop Alhambra had run out of options. Resistance was futile. Granada was the last refuge of the Moors in Spain. The armies of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had defeated the Muslim defenders. There was nothing left to do but surrender. When the Muslim ruler in Granada presented himself to the king who had defeated him,
in the last holdout of Spain's Moors, he expected to be beheaded. King Ferdinand instead gave him a brotherly embrace. That was in 1492. He still had to lead his people out of Spain. The sporadic 700-plus year effort historians call the Reconquista was now complete. Veterans of savage combat would now have to find another place to fight. The Moors at Granada lost their home of over 700 years. Under their rule, a balance was achieved in this region between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Promises were made that Muslims and Jews who stayed would have their rights respected, but that promise was broken. In this we see a pattern that would repeat in the land of Native Americans. The royal palace at Granada is called the Alhambra. By the time of the capitulation to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Granada was paying tribute to the Christians. But that wasn't enough. They demanded surrender. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella found the Alhambra to their liking and set up their throne here. So it's here that Christopher Columbus traveled to pitch his plan to compete with Portugal in controlling the spice trade from India. Again, Columbus was told he had underestimated the distance to India. That didn't stop Columbus from approaching the king and queen of the newly unified Spain. Intrigued by the possibility of outcompeting their rivals in Portugal, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel gave Columbus a fair hearing. Then they said no. But as crestfallen Columbus was leaving Granada, Queen Isabel had him summoned to the throne. She would finance the journey. The royals ordered that Spaniards help with provisioning the journey. 3 sailing ships would carry Columbus into the uncharted waters to the east. Every American schoolchild knows the names: the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Calling on divine protection, Columbus and his crew set off for India. Columbus negotiated terms with the royals. He would govern any discovered lands, get a share of any wealth he generated, and would receive the rank of admiral of the ocean seas. On the verge of mutiny, land was sighted in the West Indies. The hungry, exhausted crew landed on an island Columbus named San Salvador. This island was a savior to the battered crew, largely because of the native people. Out of curiosity and hospitality, these Spaniards were given respite from their brutal journey. These people were the Tainos. Records of the journey describe them as being friendly and welcoming. However, what the Tainos first offered as hospitality became demands by the Spaniards, demands that were hard to meet. The relationship soon became abusive, and the Tainos must have been relieved to see Columbus leave. Columbus did leave, eager to contact traders in India. Certain that he was near the subcontinent, Columbus named the people he encountered Indians, a name that persists to this day. Having wrecked the Santa Maria, Columbus returned to Spain in the Niña and Pinta, carrying news of his successful journey and some gold items he got from the people who received him. Those native people found themselves dying of diseases their shaman could not cure. The Christian monarchs were to be found in Barcelona, so it's there Columbus sailed. Columbus was welcomed as a national hero and didn't have to wait long to see King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. He regaled the royal couple with wonders from the new lands he discovered, but besides some golden bracelets, there was not a lot of wealth. Among his offerings was a hammock and some Native Americans he had kidnapped. Notwithstanding his superstar status, Columbus had to bring Spanish colonists on his next voyage. He would depart Spain with 17 ships this time.
He had orders from the monarchs to treat natives with friendly and even loving relationships. Columbus got busy exploring immediately. The friendly Tainos were still here from his first voyage, but they were much wiser to the ways of the Spaniards. The 40 crew members he had left at Navidad were all dead. There had been some conflict with the native population in the absence of Columbus, who blamed the neighboring chief and quickly went about landing the colonists and continuing his explorations. Wherever Columbus came ashore, he claimed the land for Spain and implored the people living there to accept the King of Spain as their leader. The words were in Castilian Spanish, an unintelligible tongue to Native Americans. The Tainos were living on most of the islands in the Caribbean Sea. Columbus remarked about their friendliness and peaceful nature in a letter to the rulers of Spain. After extolling the friendly and peaceful nature, Columbus ended his letter by writing, "They would make great slaves." As Columbus sailed around the West Indies, he noted that the Tainos comprised 4 main groups. Another group was the more aggressive Caribs. Columbus wrote that he escaped being seized by a group of Caribs when he correctly predicted a lunar eclipse. The Tainos helped Columbus and his men survive in this new land, but the Spaniards demanded more than the Tainos could possibly give. The Spaniards demanded everything from food to female companionship. Beginning with his second voyage, Columbus began enslaving Native Americans. He sent 200 slaves to Queen Isabel. Horrified at the cruelty, she had them sent back with a clear message that slavery would not be tolerated by the Spanish crown. Enslavement was not the worst crime committed under the governorship of Columbus. Spanish soldiers beheaded Tainos, burned some of them alive, cut their hands off, and didn't give the Spaniards a quota of gold. Thousands are said to have committed suicide to escape Spanish cruelty. As governor, Columbus mistreated colonists as well, and once returned to Spain in chains and was thrown in prison there. King Ferdinand intervened, freeing Columbus and even sending him on a 4th voyage, but all his governing power was taken away. While the royal family disapproved of his treatment of Native Americans and Spanish colonists alike, they welcomed the riches he sent to them in the city of Seville.
We are in Spain. We're in the city of Seville, and this place is called the Alcázar. This place, the Alcázar in Seville, is where they put on an extra wing. The royal family actually put on an extra wing into this palace, especially to deal with things in the wake of Columbus's exploration. What Columbus brought back from America was so rich and so special that the royal family opened a special wing in this palace, especially to deal with things from America. They called it the Admiral's Quarters, and that's because Columbus was known as the Admiral of the Open Seas. That was the rank he was given by the royal family.
His 4th voyage was a desperate attempt to break through these islands to India or China. Although he failed at this, Columbus returned to Spain a hero. To his dying day, Columbus was convinced that Asia was just a little further to the west. Soon after that final voyage, Christopher Columbus died. His tomb in Seville to this day. One result of the voyages of Columbus was the Treaty of Tortosias, separating areas of claim between Spain and Portugal. The treaty was arranged by the Pope with no consent of people who lived in these lands. The actions of Columbus and his explorers were carefully noted by witnesses and are found in Seville in the Torre de Oro, the Golden Tower. The fame of Christopher Columbus
known as Cristobal Colon in Spain and Latin America, was unmatched by any other European explorer. Both Spain and Italy take pride in his achievements. But to the peaceful and beautiful Taino people, Columbus was the bringer of doom. Having weathered countless tropical storms since time immemorial, how could they survive their encounters with these Europeans? Thousands were dead from enslavement and savage abuse by these people from Spain. But the greatest decimation came from the horrible diseases carried by these strangers. The gentle Tainos were almost driven to extinction. It would take centuries for them to even begin to recover. You're watching Ramping Up Your English. The video we just watched is entitled The Storm. From the long ago arrival of Europeans to the West Indies, we can see actions and situations that will become patterns as people from Europe interact with Native Americans. Let's list some of those actions from the video. The Tainos, Native Americans, welcome Columbus and his crew and extend hospitality to them. Europeans and Americans engage in trade. Europeans are enriched by this trade. Europeans start demanding that which was freely given in hospitality. Native Americans struggle to meet these demands. Europeans abuse their Native American hosts. Violence is used in this abuse. This abuse takes place in the absence of a leader. Native Americans seek revenge for this abuse. This is likely what happened to the crew members left at La Navidad. They were killed by a local tribe. Europeans blame a group of Native Americans that had no part in the violence used against them. Columbus readily accepted the explanation that the crew at La Navidad was attacked and killed by an inland tribe. Europeans enslave or attempt to enslave Native Americans. Higher government authorities disapprove of abuse by their citizens against Native Americans. Queen Isabel, you'll remember, refused to accept slaves sent by Columbus. Native American population plummets due to death by European diseases. All 10 of these factors were at play during the contact between Europeans and Native Americans. We'll keep an eye on this list as time goes on. We'll see patterns of the interactions to come and note if we need to add any to this list. Discovering such patterns is a vital part of social studies. They become the basis for complex cause-effect relationships. As we revisit these patterns as we move forward in history, we'll learn the language skills involved in conveying these factors and the cause-effect relationships they suggest. The voyages of Columbus cannot be overemphasized in its importance both to Europe and Native American population in North and South America. It began what historians call the Colombian Exchange, and some name this the Modern Age. Most Native American groups were unaffected by what happened in the Caribbean islands. Not yet. However, the patterns of savage cruelty, utter disrespect, and murder that were set on these islands would speed to the mainland in remarkably short time. The arrival of Columbus began a profound change in American life.
I love to hear from viewers. You can send me an email at letscreatepro@gmail.com. Be sure to visit my website, letscreate.org, to see the support materials for this episode.
Click on the Native American unit and then on the episode 96 page.
You can watch and even download this episode and more from archive.org/details/roguetv. All episodes are there. Enter Ramping Up Your English in the search box and choose the episode you want. Ramping Up Your English can be seen on RVTV on channel 15 and 115 on the Ashland Home Network and on channel 182 in the rest of Southern Oregon on Charter Cable. You can stream Ramping Up Your English for free from rvtv.sou.edu. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, and my talented and dedicated crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you help make this program an award winner. Join me next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RVTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.